Greedy by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Greedy liked to eat. In fact, Mr. Greedy loved to eat. And the more he ate, the fatter he became. And the more fatter he became, and the more hungry he became. And the more hungry he became, and the more he became fatter, until it went up. Mr. Greedy lived in a house that looked rather like himself. It was a roly-poly sort of house. One morning, Mr. Greedy awoke earlier than usual. As usual, he'd be dreaming about food as usual, and that made him wake up feeling hungry as usual. So Mr. Greedy got up and ate the most enormous breakfast. This is what Mr. Greedy had. Toast, 2 slices, cornflakes, 1 pot, milk, 1 bottle, sugar, 1 bowlful, toast, 3 slices, eggs, 3 boiled, toast, 4 slices, marmalade, 1 pot, bottle, 1 dish, marmalade, 1 pot. When he finished his enormous breakfast, Mr. Greedy sat up in his chair and thought, "That was a lovely breakfast," he thought to himself. "Now I wonder what would be nice to have for lunch." He decided that the only thing to do was go for a very long walk. That morning, Mr. Greedy walked. And then he discovered a cave. "That's funny," he thought. "I've never seen that there before." Mr. Greedy, being a sort of curious sort of a fellow, decided to climb into the cave. It was really dark and no lights there. Then he came across some light, and with the lights was giant steps. Nobody has ever climbed these steps before, and even the person who got this house might be very large and impressive, and whoever was the trying one who has to climb up these stairs would be the winner with 1,000,000 trophies. So Mr. Greedy then sniffed, and then he climbed up the table with more huffing and puffing. "Mr. Greedy, come up the steps!" And he went up and up and up. At the top of the steps, Mr. Greedy came across a door. It was rather the biggest door Mr. Greedy had ever seen in his whole life. So Mr. Greedy, being a curious sort of fellow, tried to enter it, and it wasn't quite set. So Mr. Greedy went in, and there was an amazing sight, the biggest room in the world. The floor was bigger than a field, the tables were bigger than trees, and the benches were bigger than houses, and the tables were bigger than trees. Mr. Greedy felt very small when he sniffed. Coming from up the table was a very good smell. Mr. Greedy sniffed again, and then he got up. And then it was another amazing sight. It was food! Mr. Greedy just licked his lips. Said Mr. Greedy to himself, and then Mr. Greedy began to eat. That day, Mr. Greedy ate everything. He ate an orange. He even eat an apple was on the table, and Mr. Greedy just munched the apple. Then Mr. Greedy looked around. Over on the other side of the table was colossal things. There were giant colossal peas as large as water, and giant colossal potatoes as large as cushions, and giant colossal sausages as big as trees. Then Mr. Greedy, being Mr. Greedy, began to eat again. Suddenly, a saddle fell on him, and Mr. Greedy had found himself being picked up by a giant hand and looking into the eyes of a real live giant. On who? Thundered the giant. On who? Mr. Greedy was so frightened that only managed to squeak his name. Mr. Greedy, he sniffed. The giant laughed as loud as thunder. Greedy by name and greedy by nature, he bellowed. Well, I think, Mr. Greedy, that you need to be taught a lesson. And what a lesson it was. The giant made Mr. Greedy ate everything on that giant table. After it finished, Mr. Greedy felt very ill indeed. Very ill. He could only just burst out any minute. Now, said the giant in a more quiet voice, do you promise to never be greedy ever again? Oh, yes, moaned Mr. Greedy. I promise. Very well, said the giant. Then I'll let you go. Mr. Greedy came down from the table and looking as dumb as anyone could look, and quite down extraordinarily miserable. And from this day to that on, doesn't look like his old self, now looks like this, which suits him very well. So, if you know anyone who is greedy as Mr. Greedy used to be, you know what to tell them, don't you? Beware of giants.